So at this time, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Saul Gruber. He's coming to us from Miami Beach, Florida. Saul's been a trial lawyer for more than 30 years. He believes that it is, quote, essential to tap into the jurors' desires and fears as it relates to our clients' harms. His firm, Gruber Trial Consulting, is a unique blend of experience, focus groups, rule development, discovery, and deposition strategies. His presentation is titled Maximizing Cases with Focus Groups. And Saul, take it away.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Want to say hi to everybody. I'm the leadoff hitter, so to speak, which is always fun. I want to. The problem with lawyers is, well, I guess we're lawyers and we think like lawyers. We were trained and we've been trained through 30 years of practice to analyze problems and analyze situations a certain way. And it's exactly opposite of the way jurors look at things. I mean, when you think about it, do you think Dan Pfeiffer, Betsy Green, or Rich Haley get their large verdicts because they sat around and thought to themselves, I think this would be good? Well, maybe some of them do because they're special lawyers. But for the rest of us, we need to look to focus groups. We need to look at people who are not us, people who are going to make the decision. And if this election has taught us anything, we know that there's confirmation bias out there. In other words, everybody has a certain preconceived notion. Everybody has a lens they look at things through, right? We had 78 million votes for President-elect Biden. We have 70 million votes for President Trump. That's a lot of people looking at the same issues and taking completely different views of what they're seeing. And that's what jurors do. And if we just look at it the way we look at it, if we just worry about our client and not think, what is the defendant going to do, or how is the jury going to look at our trial and the evidence put forth, we're making a real bad mistake. Because we don't need to just look at the jury charges. We need to think to ourselves, what does the jury want to hear to find in our favor? And more importantly, what does a jury want to hear to give our client the verdict they deserve? And that's where focus groups come in. So there's a couple different ways you can do a focus group, right? You could hire a firm like mine. I'm sure there's firms in your state. And we would come in, we would set everything up, and we would get you an awful lot of information. But that's not the only way to do it. Now, if you've turned down $600,000 and you know you're going to trial, I would suggest you want a trial consultant. You want someone like me or anybody in your area to come in and work with you on the case. But guess what? That's not the only way to do it. You can get a buddy who's a lawyer down the street to handle focus groups on your cases, and you can handle focus group on their cases. That way you're neutral and you don't have you're not in the game, so to speak. You don't have skin in the game, because you want to try not to have skin in the game, so to speak. Now, this is what it looks like when you go with a professional, right? You have a nice socially distanced conference table, you have a two-way mirror, but you could do the same thing at a hotel, just not have the two-way mirror, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. One thing that we're seeing now, we're going to get into this in a few minutes, but one thing we're seeing now is online focus groups. Now, I can tell you that as someone who's done focus groups both professionally and for their own cases for the last 32 years, I never liked online focus group. I felt that we didn't have the same connection, and there was a camaraderie, especially amongst the jurors, that you're not getting. But in today's day and age, we're really not going to have much of a choice for a long time to do some online focus groups. And when we get to the pros and cons of them, you'll see what I mean. But over the next 6 months, if not longer, we're definitely going to be doing a lot of things online. Is this the new normal? I think it is. I think that I don't know what's happening in Indiana, but I know that throughout the Midwest, it appears that COVID is raging. And I know back in New York, in New Jersey, the courts were reopening and now they're closing back down. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, when you're going to do a focus group, right? Everybody talks about a focus group, but do you guys know what you're going to do there, right? Because that's really the important part. It's not just getting the people there, it's what am I going to do with it once I get there? So there's a couple of different ways to do this. You can do a concept focus group, which I happen to think is a really good focus group in every case you should do. And a concept focus group is kind of where you bring the people in and you say to them, okay, there was a motor vehicle accident. What do you think? And just let them start to go and go from the focus group people, the participants, what your next question is. Because you want to know what their first instinct is, right? Because let's face it, our first instinct is normally the one we're going to end up with. So you want to hear if somebody's going to say TV lawyer. You want to hear if somebody's going to say, oh, I guess there was an injury. And you want to hear if somebody says, I guess someone wasn't paying attention. You want to know what is their first thing that comes to their mind. Then there's a narrative. I find that in a lot of focus groups that we're doing, the narrative is also very helpful, especially as a second focus group. So the narrative is where you put together a story, and you want to make it bare bones. You want to make it really in favor of the defendant, right? Because I'm assuming this is a plaintiff organization. I mean, we're plaintiff lawyers. I normally don't do this for DRI, and you don't want to win the focus group. You want to find out what your issues are. So you want to put it all in the defense. But the good thing about a narrative focus group is it gives context to certain facts, especially in a complicated products liability claim, medical malpractice claim. It's nice to have a narrative maybe after you've done a concept focus group. And remember, there are two different focus groups. You can do clopenings, and that is an argumentative opening where the main plaintiff lawyer will take the side of the plaintiff and the best lawyer will take the side of the defendant, and will argue the most important points and see what they come up with, what the focus group comes up with. This is a third way. A lot of times we always do a concept when we represent people or when we help people. Then we do a second focus group. We try to do 2 in a day, and I suggest you do the same if you're doing it on your own. And by the way, a little bit later in this presentation, we're going to go through exactly how to do it on your own for about $1,000. Because that way, at least when you stop listening to me today, hopefully you're going to do focus groups either with a professional or on your own, but do them. But anyway, in the morning, we'll do a concept one. And then in the afternoon, with a separate group, we'll do either a narrative or a clopening, depending on what fits the case better. You could do mock trials. I've not loved mock trials. I know there are a lot of insurance companies and defense firms that do. I think that unless you're looking specifically of what works with a witness, there's just so much that can happen differently in a courtroom. I'm not sure that it gives you what the others will give you. One thing you should always do is with your demonstrative evidence and or timelines, you should always put them before the focus group, right? Because these documents are supposed to speak for themselves. I know it sounds silly, but they really are. What good is a demonstrative evidence if it doesn't ring out and say something to the jury? You should not have to explain it. If you're explaining a demonstrative evidence, that means it's not good. You should be able to reach a conclusion. Same with the timeline. If you're doing these, and I think you should in every case, especially timelines, jurors love timelines. They should be done in a way that they're persuasive and that they tell the jury exactly what they need to know without any other explanation. So you really want to focus group them as well, just to make sure they're okay. I just had a conversation 2 days ago with a company that does medical illustrations and asked them, do you focus group this? And they said to me that most of their clients, the lawyers, if it is a large case, they will focus group. If it is a small case, they won't. I don't think any case is too small to focus group. You'll do it differently, but you should absolutely do it. Valuation. I don't subscribe to that at all. Tell me what the value of the case is. I just think they're not getting enough information. There's too much variables as to valuations. However, in states where you are able to suggest and request a demand in closing arguments, I would focus group what number would be offensive to the jury and have them lead you that way. I think that is a way that you can do it. But what is the case worth? Pain and suffering, punitive damages, things of that nature. My experience is it's just not, you haven't made the connection with this focus group. It's just that they probably in most cases haven't even met the client. So I don't recommend that. Do it yourself. This is probably what I'm about to go over now is probably the most important thing you're going to hear from me today. Focus group Fridays. When I was in practice, once a month, the last Friday of every month, we had a focus group in the office. Now, I know it violates the cardinal rule, do it in a hotel room. Sometimes we would. More often than not, we just didn't. We had a very large conference room. We had there was videotape in there. We were able to do it there. And we would either go on Craigslist and put in a little ad in Craigslist, or what I liked is we went to employment companies and we said, we need a certain amount of what you wanted. Do you want conservative people? Do you want people who are looking for a job as a banker? People who are looking for a job as a construction worker? There's always people through those companies that are going to be available. And you bring 6 in, you bring 5 in, and you put some bagels. Tell them from New Jersey. Put some bagels on the credenza there next to the conference room, next to the table, and you just ask them questions. You don't even need to have a case, right? You just ask them questions. What do you think about this? And you videotape it, because there are always issues. And if we would always go around to the lawyers in the office, are there any cases coming up for trial, for mediation, or things that you're just having trouble with? Once a month, you put your 12 focus groups in the can, and you're really doing all of your clients a service. And you could do that, when you think about it, for less than $1,000. Less than $1,000. You can focus group a case for an hour, 2 hours, and get some really good information. You want to videotape it, because not so much that you want to watch the videotape over and over. I think everybody knows how painful that could be. If you were trying, I know about 15 years ago, we would always videotape our experts. And it was painful to have to watch that during trial, because you have to listen to yourself and all those things. But what's good about the videotape is you get to see the people's reaction and how they talk to each other. We would take that videotape and we would send it. I still do this to today. Send it to rev.com. Now, I'm not a ambassador for rev.com. I get no money from them. But you could set a videotape up for a half an hour. Let's say it's a half an hour videotape. They will do a transcript, and you'll be able to, because you get an artificial, one of 2 transcripts, either someone actually doing it or it's AI. I normally get the AI transcript, which is pretty good, and you can go make the changes, and boom, you have what everyone said in Word. So you're able to use that as you're prepping for trial, as you're prepping for a deposition, as you're coming up with your rules. You're able to have that in front of you. It's really invaluable. You want small and short groups. I know some firms will have 20 to 25 people, then they'll break them up into 2 groups and let them deliberate and have a couple video cameras going. That could get expensive. And it becomes unwieldy in the sense that sometimes you can't make sure that everybody is giving you their true opinion. And also, when something is said at a focus group, you may want to really spend some time with. When there's 24 people, a lot of times you can't change on the fly. When you have a small 6 to 8 groups and you do 2 of them, you're able to change it up, right? Because there's certain things you do with a focus group that will taint them. I mean, once they see that there's a baby, and if there's a picture and the baby has a brain injury, a head injury, that will taint everything they see for the rest of the focus group. So the testing you do after that may or may not help you. So you want to try to only do one of those tainting things in each focus group. But I like small and short focus groups. It really gives you a lot of information. Again, as I said before, you want to do them in either a non-legal office or a hotel room. If you're in a big building that has a common area that you can rent, you do that. Hotel rooms normally are between $200 and $400, pretty inexpensive. If you're doing focus group Fridays and you want to save even more money, though, do them in your office. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, are online focus groups as good? Well, the short answer is no. But the long answer is it depends on how the jury is selected in this new COVID area, right? You want to make sure that if you're doing a focus group for a trial, you know how your county or your judge is bringing jurors in. We just worked on a case that got tried about 6 weeks ago in Ohio. In there, they were only bringing people in who either were not really afraid of COVID, and also people who weren't saying we'll never wear a mask. So we knew we were losing a lot of jurors that would be on that panel. So we wanted to limit those type of to only bring those people into focus groups. So we have the pandemic. Comfort and convenience is a pro, right? For a online focus group, people are just as forthcoming. They're sitting like we all are here. Of course, the problem, as you'll see in cons, is that also means they can go like that, and I can't do anything. The phone can ring, they're gone. The kids are in the background, perhaps screaming. They're not listening anymore. It's certainly less expensive. We're able to do, for the cost of an online focus group, about $3,600. That doesn't include fees, but that's much less than what you would be doing live in person. The cons: technology. Certain people just don't have the technology. You're going to lose them, and you're going to lose their thought process, which you don't want to do. Their internet connection. Not everybody, believe it or not, has a really big internet connection. And the lack of interaction. And really, number 6 is key. Are they the same type of jurors that you're going to get at trial? I would say right now, they may not be. So you have to work really hard in understanding what your court is going to bring in, who your court is going to bring in on your panel, on the veneer, and try to match that. That is the most important thing you can do for any either live focus groups or online focus groups. And this is what they look like. It's really not that complicated. If you can watch, you can talk, you can set up where the names are there. We can do polls. We can break these people up into rooms if we want to. But it's really that simple online. Now, this is something that is incredible that I have to say, but I really believe it's true. We are, as trial lawyers, a competitive group, right? I mean, in everything we do. We have huge egos because that's how we can do what we do. So is the purpose to win the focus group, to convince the focus group participants I'm right because I'm the plaintiff lawyer? Absolutely, unequivocally, no. You don't, that's irrelevant to you. In fact, you want them not to like the case and find out why and what they would want to know to like the case. That's the purpose of a focus group. I know that when we're getting ready to try the case, we don't even realize, especially if it's a bad case or there are facts that are killing us, by the time we're opening, we don't even think they're a problem, right? I call them litigation blinders because we have convinced ourselves that our explanation for not going to the doctor for 6 months makes perfect sense. We convince ourselves that our explanation that, yeah, there's no property damage, but it doesn't really matter, makes sense. We convince ourselves in a medical malpractice case that the fact that we didn't go back to the doctor when they told us to, well, we had a good reason not to. Litigation blinders, and they hurt every single time. And that's why whatever you tell the focus group, when you're sitting down and preparing it, the story and the evidence has to be in the best light of the defense. It hurts when you're sitting down and writing it. I mean, it actually hurts to make the arguments that the defense is making, that it hurts your client, that hurts the person you've known now for 3 years. And if you're preparing for trial, you now have created a bond with that client, right? I mean, all of us who have tried cases, even if you don't win, you have a bond that never goes away with your client because you went through that little war with them. And now you're putting down and you're asking a focus group of 8, well, yeah, but they're a liar. It hurts. Do it. Because what you want is the focus group to understand the best defense case there is. And then they're going to explain to us how to win the case, right? Because that's what we're trying to find out. What do they think of issues and how can we make those issues better? So here is something that I'm going to show you some transcripts. It's just easier than showing you videos of focus groups. Cover up. This is all over the country. If they find out someone's lying to them, their opinion is going to be changed drastically. Okay, so lying is incredibly important, but understand something. That cuts both ways. If they think you as the lawyer lied to them or told them something you couldn't prove, they're not going to listen to you and your credibility is shot. Same thing with the plaintiff. And guess what? Once the plaintiff's lawyer or plaintiff themselves credibility is shot, you're done. So if there is anything that you think could possibly be a lie or a cover-up, you want to put that in the best light and let the focus group tell you what they think. Sequencing stories. You know, when I started practicing in 1988, and we learned, you know, that here's the story. Plaintiff woke up, plaintiff got in the car, plaintiff went from point A to point B, they were in an accident. Right before the accident, they had no pain. Right after the accident, their neck and back started to bother them, and then take them down to the doctor. Well, is that the best way to sequence the story? Maybe, maybe not. But you want to start putting evidence in front of the focus group, facts in front of the focus group, to see what they think of those facts. How does it change the way they look at either the defendant or the plaintiff? Let me show you an example. We have two things right here. The left is from a motor vehicle accident in Florida. The right is a pressure ulcer in St. Louis. For those of you who don't know me, I did nursing home work for probably 27 years, was chair of the AAJ Nursing Home Litigation Group. So you're going to find a lot of things I talk about are nursing home involved. But this is the car of the plaintiff. One thing we learned is that as soon as the focus group, we did two focus groups in this case, as soon as they saw this car, automatically they felt the plaintiff was speeding and not having her car under, she didn't have control of her car and ran into a tree. And that's exactly what the defendant wants them to think. Now, in the case with the car, there was somebody driving down the turnpike, an accident happened to their left. One of the cars came into their lane and pushed them off to the side of the road. What we learned is in the sequencing, we want to put the picture in last. Because if we put the picture in first, it would go right to the defendant's arguments that although we weren't involved in the accident, we still weren't paying attention. So in sequencing this story, we knew two things. We had to inoculate our case from that juror thought process. And we had to show the jury why all of this doesn't matter at all before they see it. That's what we learned in sequencing. To the right, something I learned not only in this case from a focus group, but in trying pressure ulcer cases myself, is once the jury sees this picture, they no longer are thinking, oh, this is a no big deal case. They are now thinking, oh my God, that's what a wound looks like? And oh, that is so disgusting, that poor woman. Let's look at this case very carefully. They know it's important. So what we chose to do, both in my cases, as well as in our clients' cases, is try to have these pictures shown in voir dire. So that right away, they understand how important this case is. Then, maybe never even show it at trial. Have it in an envelope. Let the jury use their imagination about what they saw in voir dire. And when you're cross-examining and somebody is saying something different, you can simply pick the picture up and say, hey, this is P3. Have you seen this? Oh, I know what it is. And then put it down. And what you're doing is going back to what they know, how serious it is, and you don't have to show it to them again. So things like that is what we're working on in focus groups. So here's a focus group where we showed the picture to them, just to tell them this is what a pressure ulcer is. What I love about these type of focus groups, and we're going to go through some questions that you can ask on your own, is, you know, what is it? And they said she had a crater in her back, right? And now we're maybe not talking about it as a wound. Now we're talking about it as a crater in her back. In focus groups I did years ago, they said, oh my God, it's the size of a basketball, or oh my God, it's the size of a softball. And now that's how we're describing it. We're no longer just saying the wound, and we learned this at focus groups. She had a crater in her back. I used to say a smelly, pussy, infected hole the size of a softball. That became descriptive, I think. Other things we're looking at in focus groups, the trial story and theme. You know, there's all these books out there. One is better than the other. I mean, one thing that's been really cool about the pandemic, and probably the only really good thing about the pandemic, is it gave us time to read, right? It gave us time to breathe. It gave us time to think. And one of the things I did was read virtually everything there is on trying cases. Had most of the books, whether it be David Ball on damages, whether it be the multiple reptile books, um, the Friedman books, Polarizing the Case, Rules of the Road. I don't know if anybody has ever read the Mark Mandel Framing the Case book. It's on AAJ Press. It's just outstanding. Keith Mitnick's Don't Eat the Bruises. Not only is it a great book, I literally have it right here because I was working on something earlier this morning. These are great books. And one thing these books all share is trial story and theme and how to get to it. So let's talk about themes. This is something that came out, I think, in St. Louis. And we really played with it in a lot of focus groups. This was a nursing home case. And one thing the focus group participant said is, well, it's not just what they did that caused the fall, but they have the responsibility for what they do next. Isn't that interesting? Right? We see this in all the wellness seminars. It's not the problem you have, it's how you react to the problem, what you do in light of a problem. That's really part of your case. If it's a medical malpractice case and they realized something happened in the surgery, well, what did they do once they knew there was a problem? If it's a products case, what did they do when they first got the memo that there was an issue? It's a nursing home case. What did they do when they first learned somebody fell? That becomes very, very powerful and something you should examine in every one of your cases, even car accident cases. What did they do once they realized there was an issue? A lot of times we deal with, and this was a case where it was an interesting focus group. It was in Atlanta. And we loaded up on conservative jurors because that's what my client wanted. And that's not a bad thing either. And somebody said, else, there's no cure for death. And as I'm listening, I thought, wow, that's really a good concept if you're a defense lawyer. And then someone else came back and said, yeah, there's no cure for death, but how you're being treated is important. And if there's poor care, you need to be held accountable. Held accountable. These are the type of words, when you do a focus group, you realize that the conservative jurors believe in that. They believe in responsibility. They believe in accountability. And now what it's teaching us is to start framing our cases that way. Something that frustrates me and always frustrated me as a trial lawyer are lawyers who, in opening statements and really in the first part of their case, focus on the client, the plaintiff. We know now we should be focusing on the defendant, right? That is what the case is about. What the defendant did or did not do, which caused this. I'm not minimizing the plaintiff, but if you have them thinking of the plaintiff from the beginning, it is then much easier for the jury to buy into the defense. The defense is that the plaintiff did not do certain things. If you have them thinking about the defendant and you're showing they didn't do this, they didn't do that, they didn't move the person when they were supposed to, they did not take the temperature when they were supposed to, they did not feed the person when they were supposed to. No, maybe there is no cause for death, but they still have to be held accountable for the way they treated the person's life. And that could be very powerful. And you can find all of that out if you do your focus groups the right way. As I said in the beginning, confirmation bias is nasty. And boy, this, in the last couple of weeks, it's been crazy in this country. Certain people are saying there's all this fraud. Other people are saying you're crazy, and they're literally attacking each other. Why do we think that a jury is just going to listen to us and agree with us? I don't understand why we think that. We have to test the confirmation bias. We have to. And if you don't know what confirmation bias is, I think I said it earlier, but it's worth saying it again. We all have preconceived notions. We all look at things a certain way. I am a plaintiff lawyer. I've been a plaintiff lawyer since I started clerking in a law firm in 1986. It is now 2020. I no longer practice trying cases, but what I do is consult and assist plaintiff firms. If an insurance company came to me tomorrow and said, we'd like your help on a case, I would say no, because that's not who I am. But with that comes a way of looking at things. It's the same with defendants, and it's the same with jurors. They are influenced by what they read. They are influenced by what they hear. They are influenced by what they see. And this polarization that's going on in this country over the last few years is definitely affecting us in the jury pool. So, one of the things we want to know is, what is the first thing you think about when you think of, in this case, it was a nursing home case. She said she has a negative association with institutions. That means we have to build on that. We have to find out more from her why, and we've got to frame our case taking advantage of that. I think Don Keenan in the Reptile called it codes. I think people before Don Keenan called it something else. But what we have to do is understand our jurors' first instinct, take advantage of that, and frame our case that will go in that direction. Here's something else we asked. And again, I'm just giving you examples, and we'll get into how you get to this in a few minutes. We always think that when we have a corporate shell game as the defendant, somehow that means all we have to do is show it to the jury and they're going to hate them. What I'm finding out is that's not true. People understand it. People say, hey, as this person said, that's how the game works. And that doesn't offend them. So you need to do more. You need to not just say, look, it's a corporate shell, but how they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that harm affected the plaintiff. So know that, and you're going to learn that if you do more focus groups. Here is what I think are phenomenal in focus groups. And this is what I'm suggesting everybody does. Rhetorical questions. Hey, you can do this on yourself. I'm sorry, excuse me. You could do this yourself. I'm going to show you some questions that I've used, and we'll talk about some other types of questions. Here we go. Why would a family put their loved one in a nursing home? Just ask that question and let these people give you answers. Because when they're giving you answers, they're going to say things like, well, I wouldn't, but I guess somebody could put them in if they're so sick they can't be cared for anymore. Or I guess somebody could put, and then you would ask, well, do you hold that against them? Is that a problem? No. Okay. Now what you're learning, by squeezing the orange and finding out more, what reasons are acceptable to jurors of why someone is in a nursing home. And now that confirmation bias, that is, I would never put my mother in a nursing home. Therefore, this issue never could happen. I would have protected mom. If you know that there's 4 reasons that's acceptable to put someone in a nursing home, now you're breaking through that confirmation bias. You're starting to find out that these people may be on the plaintiff's side. Why would a nursing home resident refuse care? Think about that for a minute. Defendants in a nursing home like to say, well, we tried to turn them. We tried to feed them, but they refused care. And that could be very dangerous. I know what the answer to that would be if I was the lawyer, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that dangerous thought process. So in your focus group, you're going to deal with that. Have these people tell you why a resident may refuse care. They may come up with some unbelievable things that you can then use in your case. I've had people tell me, well, they may refuse care because the aide was hitting them. They might refuse care because they miss their family. They might refuse care because they're not feeling well. They might refuse care because they don't like the food. And now you've got to find those answers out in your case and start building and framing your case. Same thing in a left-hand turn case. Why would somebody make a left-hand turn when someone's coming in the other direction? Well, maybe they didn't see them. Maybe they were in a hurry. If you're going to get all this information. Why would somebody not go back to a doctor when they were told to go? Why would somebody not tell all their complaints to a doctor? Why would somebody not follow doctor's instructions? Why would somebody take a pressure washer and put their hand in front of it and then blow their hand off? Ask all of these rhetorical questions. Get the answers. Keep squeezing the orange. Keep asking what else? Why? Does that make a difference? And now you've got information you can start building and framing your case through. Here's something that's very interesting. For those of you who didn't do nursing home cases or any type of cases where you are bringing a direct action against the employer for negligence. Someone said if the employees are miserable, they're not going to treat your clientele well either. And they started to get into why don't nursing homes treat their employees like IBM? What vacation time do they have? What mental health services are they given? Because it's a tough job. Now, if you're doing this before you do a lot of discovery, you're starting to learn these answers, right? So in discovery, you're going to ask an aide, well, how much vacation time do you have? What's your health insurance like? How do people treat you there? And that may be a key part of the case that without this focus group, you never would have addressed. You never would have approached. That's how cases, I think that, I play in a sandbox with some defense trial consultants. And the big phrase they like to use is nuclear verdict. And of course, I say just verdict. But that's all they're worried about, nuclear verdict. So if you begin to do these things in discovery, now you're starting to, maybe with a couple facts that you gain, scare the defense and scare the carrier that this could be a nuclear verdict. Just by these type of questions or requests for admissions, you may be in a position to start raising the level of offer and scaring them. Because really, isn't that what a settlement is? It's the defendant understanding the risk they have and trying to buy out from that risk. Or as Steve Levin in Chicago says, they're buying a release from your client. We're not trying to get money from the defendant. They're trying to get a release from us. And when we start thinking that way, our settlements will go up. And of course, we have to also try cases and get verdicts, but this is another way of getting the larger settlements. When you have a death certificate that says she died of natural causes, regardless what type of case it is, find out what the focus group really thinks about this. Here in a nursing home case, the injuries were just horrific. And just horrible, and clearly came as a result of being at the nursing home. And the death certificate said she died of natural causes. And this is one person said, "How is that natural?" And I thought, well, that was really good. I enjoyed that. And when we were this is a case that was in Missouri, and this is really something. First of all, they said they might have a hitch in their get along. Now, I can't say hitch in their get along and be taken seriously, but local counsel could. But this is something that a person said: every life is worth something. Just because you're 91 doesn't mean that you don't deserve the best or what everybody else does as somebody that's 31. And you know what? The plaintiff lawyer used that almost verbatim and got a large verdict. And this is something that is important because everybody agreed with that. When you're doing your own focus groups, what I also like to ask is, what was the most compelling fact heard? And this is a case where somebody whose leg was wrapped too tight and he ultimately needed an amputation. Now, he was a diabetic, and the defense is, well, it was a diabetic foot. Of course, there were intervening things in that the leg wasn't wrapped correctly. And this was something that I thought was really interesting. One of the focus group participants said, every day you get to keep your leg is a miracle for that guy. And they just squeezed his leg off. Interesting way of looking at it. And they're giving you different, they're giving you ways to argue it that maybe you wouldn't think of. I like to, and if you're doing your own focus groups, because that's really what I want to talk to you about, compare to life or work, right? Because you know what these people do, you know what their life is, and compare. Here's somebody who said, I asked them, tell us about the minimum standards in your profession. And he said, I mean, the thing about regulations sometimes is that it was a bare minimum. And since that focus group, that's how we talk about minimums. We never use the phrase minimum. We use the phrase bare minimum. That's something we learned there, and it's pretty important. When asking certain people about the most important thing they heard about the case was the nursing home. You can smell it. It's death. It smells like death. Well, that means in discovery, you're going to find out from everybody what did it smell like when you went to visit mom? And then you have to frame the case talking about that and why the family, let's take it further, why the family did not move the resident when they knew it smelled like death, because that's what the jury's going to think. If their initial instinct is you can smell it, it smells horrible. Well, why aren't you moved? And you want to get into that. And that goes back to why would you put somebody in a nursing home? You start putting these things together. So what do you want to know more about? Right? That's what we're asking the focus group people at the end. What else do you want to know? What didn't we first went to them, what was the most important thing you heard? Now, what else? What do you want to know more about? And accountability. That's something that somebody came up with. Why is something not in the chart? We want to know more. We want to know what the policies were at this nursing home. We want to know why things are not in the chart. We want to know more about that and understand that, because you're getting that information. So you want to start thinking in your case, we've got to plug that evidence gap as well. Communication was in another case. I like to ask them, describe in one sentence what happened here. That may help you formulate your themes. Here somebody said, I go back to lighting the fire. Nursing home was not paying attention. That's where it started. That's where they lit the fire. Then it exploded, or later on when went to the hospital. It was already a runaway train. You've got 3 people putting the house fire out with buckets. I mean, one after another is what we're finding out. Now, this is what we want to know. What we see here, I think is important. We're all responsible for ourselves. She let herself get into terrible condition. The nursing has some responsibility, but everything comes back to yourself, how you treat yourself. This is something that is in every single medical case we have. And not only that, it's in every case where there's an injury, right? If somebody's 400 pounds and they're injured in an accident, and the reason they're injured is because the seatbelt couldn't stop them, people are going to say, well, why did he let himself get to that weight? So you've got to frame the case. You've got to find out what is acceptable to jurors about why you got to that weight. I mean, we have to look at the bad parts of the case, and we have to fix them or plug them the best we can. And the easiest way to do it is through focus groups. I like to get a checklist. So here's a case we did where we asked about different issues that they felt were going on, and we would make a list. And that would give us different things we can do in preparing for trial, how to plug our cases into these types of cases. So what do you want to know from your focus group participants? Right? We're going to finish up pretty much here. You want to know what? You want to know why? You want to know when? You want to know where? And you want to know who? Right? That's what we want in depositions. That's what we want in the focus groups, the W's. And keep going and keep going. And don't be afraid. Don't fight with anybody. Just tell them they're right and let them keep giving you their opinion after opinion after opinion. It's what you do with it that's important. And that's with my last couple of minutes I want to talk to you about. So we've got all this information, right? And now what? One of the things that I think are important is we begin to do surveys. There are companies that do them. We engage them when, in our cases where we're consultants, where we can send out surveys to an area, just like they do in politics. And what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And we begin to build a database and a profile of the type of jurors and what they think. We just conducted a number of focus groups and surveys earlier in the year in this COVID era to find out what the post-COVID juror pool thinks. And I will tell you, it isn't that different than the pre-COVID panel. What is a little more frightening for me is that we're just losing a lot of jurors. because the people who are most afraid of COVID are not going to be brought to court. More often than not, they are people who are left-leaning. More often than not, people who are left-leaning are better for the plaintiff. But when you do some focus groups and you do these surveys where you ask their opinions on things, we begin to cross-reference. And we find that people who have a large Republican-leaning, conservative-leaning bias also believe in rules. They also believe in personal accountability. They also believe that if someone's not following the rules and they know it could cause an injury and it does cause that injury, they should be held accountable. And that's really, really important. And that's what focus groups and surveys are teaching us, how to frame the case. Focus group Fridays, you should all be doing them. It's easy. Here's my contact information. If you need help with any questions, email me. If you want any advice, email me. We're always happy to help. We help people everywhere. And sadly, I'm a horrible businessman because I'm still a plaintiff lawyer, still an AAJ member. So if you have a question, I just answer it. I don't bill anybody. But thank you.
Hey, Saul, before you take off,
Sure.
Can I throw you a couple questions?
Of course.
So you made a real good point of, if we're going to be doing these focus groups, we want to make sure that the demographics or the types of jurors that we're getting in our focus groups match up with the veneer that we're likely going to look to
Right.
when we actually try the case. So, you know, if, like you said, if you've got a case where you've turned down $1 million demand and we've hired Saul Gruber, or we've hired, you know, somebody else, you know,
Sure.
we just rely on you guys to do that. But if we're trying to do our focus group Friday, let's say, you know, we got a $100,000 case, we want to do this. How do you recommend that we match our focus
Easy.
group veneer?
Yeah. What I would do, the first thing you need to find out is, you know, what, I mean, you want to know what the makeup is of your county, which is on Wikipedia. It's everywhere. It's everywhere you can possibly look. If you just plug where the trial is going to be held, it's going to have the makeup. But more importantly now, you want to find out from, and this is really COVID era, you want to find out from the court how they're picking jurors, how they're bringing people in, what rate they're bringing people in. Have you started trials in Indiana yet?
You know, there have been a handful of cases tried, but I mean, I'm still going to pretrial conferences with judges telling me we're looking at 2021, maybe 2022.
So I can tell you that what's going on in, weirdly enough, I have, as a consultant, handled a trial in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and the state of Washington during the COVID era. And the key thing that we did was we wanted to find out who was coming in. And the most recent one was in Ohio. And what the clerk told us was that when they send the summons out, they follow up with a phone call. And if someone is nervous at all about COVID, they're told not to come in. Then if anybody says, well, it's and they're told they have to wear a mask the entire time. And if somebody has any objection to that, they're not brought in. So the court is thinking to itself, that way I knock out both the extremes and we get just the middle of the road. What they're really doing is knocking out a lot of people. And so what we did when we did the focus groups, in our search, we asked those same questions and followed up. And that way we made sure we had the same type of people we would have in a jury trial. And if you're doing it yourself, you could do that through an employment agency. You could do it on Craigslist also. You know, just put it out there and then have a questionnaire so that when the person calls in to say, hey, I saw your ad in Craigslist, I want to I want to do this. Okay, you know, are you male? What's your age? How do you feel about COVID? Are you afraid? Do you wear a mask? You know, the same type of questions they would ask in the court, you ask. That's how I would make sure I would get the same COVID panel. With regard to, in general, we go by the makeup of the county. A lot of times we try to front load it with more conservative people, if we can, or people that we think really won't be nice and kind to us at trial. And the kind of people that nod their head when you're opening and they're really saying, screw you. I think you know those people. So, but it's easy to do on your own. It really is. It just takes, I mean, if you have one secretary who's answering the calls too, and you just have a setup like that, it's pretty easy. And I have
Okay.
forms if anybody needs a form for it. I mean, I'll just shoot it out to them.
That's fantastic. One other question for you, Saul, that we got from the gallery. Do you ever use Facebook or other social media to get local focus groups going?
I don't. And I'll tell you why I don't.
Okay.
Because they're all kind of related. I mean, you can. Well, let me do it this way. If you're doing them once a month, yeah, you can do that. If you're doing it for a specific case, I don't like to do that because more often than not, A, they're on Facebook. So that means they have a certain way of thinking that's not necessarily representative of everybody you're going to get. B, a lot of times one person does it, someone who's a friend of theirs sees it too. A Midwest state that I do some work with has a service where they will put focus groups together, and they do it by social media. And my client wanted to save more money, which was fine. I'm all over that. And we went through that service. And in the first focus group in the morning, a woman said, yeah, my son and my cousin will be here on the second one, because they went out and said, hey, you should do this. And the screening just isn't as good. I don't recommend it. I think you could do it I think you could call an employment agency and get better people than you can on Facebook, on Twitter, or anything like that.
Okay. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions for Saul? So you had mentioned earlier in your presentation about timelines, Saul, and we had a question about where could we see examples of effective timelines, maybe as a template or, something that we can use in our day-to-day.
I mean, I have a bunch of timelines I'm happy to send people. It's so case specific. I mean, there's some things out there that I think make nice timelines. I use a couple things. I use the name is escaping me, but there's a couple softwares. Again, if it depends if you're a Mac or if you're a Windows person, you can do it in PowerPoint. It has a great timeline setup if you want to do a timeline. There are others, and I swear they escape me what they are. If you email me, I'll send you the companies I use. But it's more than the timeline that it's more than making it pretty. It's making it effective, and what you're putting in there, and the fact that you're not putting everything but the kitchen sink in there. Timelines that I've used that I think are really effective, I've done with certain companies, and I'm sure ITLA has a couple of the illustration companies that are sponsors that you can do this with, are timelines that are interactive. So, if you press the button or hit the mouse on the date, the document itself comes out and then it goes back in. There's nothing more powerful than that, especially if you're showing an injury, which is really what you're going to do in a timeline. So I would look out to my illustration company, email me, and I'll send you the name. I'm sorry, it's just escaping me. That's what happens when you have so much that you're talking about. But remember what a timeline has to do. The timeline in and of itself has to show what was wrong, right? A timeline for the sake of a timeline is useless. A timeline that has to be explained is useless. But if you have a timeline that shows day 1, no symptoms, day 3, horrific symptoms, day 5, they finally realize it, day 7, death, you're proving your case right from the timeline. And that's really, really, really important. If it's an issue of a car accident, day 1, the accident, day 2, emergency room, complained of neck. Day 4, primary physician complained of neck. Day 6, neck shooting down into the arms. Day 8, shooting into the hands. Day 12, EMG. You're going boom, 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 boom. You're making the case. And that's what's really important. So however you do it, but there are really good timelines, and I will email to you guys, and you guys can just send it out to everybody if you want. I have no problem with that. Yeah, I mean, you'll probably get it within 10 minutes. I just can't think of it.
So, listen, we got a couple more minutes on your time, and people just keep throwing questions your way. Here's some kind of nuts and bolts logistical questions. How much do you pay focus jurors on average, and what do you recommend? And then how long do you recommend these focus groups last?
I like to go 2 hours. maybe into the third hour. You go past, and I find that when we go into the third hour, by the last half hour, everybody's loopy. Depending on where you are, I try to pay people somewhere around $100. I think you can get away with, depending on where you get the people. Sometimes we go up to 150 to 200, sometimes down to 75. It really depends on where we are and what time we're doing them, right? Because if we're doing them during the day and it could cause people to have to miss some time from work, you're going to have to pay more money. If you're doing them on a Saturday, if you do them at night, you can reduce the money. But I think in the 1 to 150 is a fair number.
Okay. What could you expound a little bit on your thoughts about virtual focus groups and
Yeah. I've done a lot of them. They're good. Don't get me wrong. They're not bad. They're just not as good as in-person focus groups. And when you think, if you're going to do them yourself, right? So let's take that first. If you're doing it yourself and you're doing it online, you've got some technology that you got to deal with, right? So I think you probably would have to be assuming we're going to use Zoom, because that's the world is using Zoom now. You're going to have to be a Zoom Pro user, and you're going to have to get everybody set up. And you're also going to have to make sure that whoever is doing it has the ability to set up, right? Not everybody has a computer. Not everybody has the ability and the internet to do it. So that's knocking out people who you may be able to bring in. What you're doing is you're taking probably the people who are poorer, in the worst economy, inner city, certain people that don't have the internet capability to do that. You're pretty much knocking them out. And that's a real danger for me in a focus group when you're doing that. But it's better than nothing. I like them in person better, and I like them when we can bring people in of all types. I've had focus groups where people had to take 3 buses to get there. And you know what? The people who have to take 3 buses to get there normally are not going to be there when you're doing it online. Short of that, and understanding that, it's pretty easy to do online. But the real issue is you're not going to get them paying as much attention. And because of that, I think some of the information you get isn't quite as good. However, if you can't have people together, it's better than nothing.
So what do you do, Saul, to compensate for that? The cons that you're describing in the virtual focus grouping?
I don't think there's a lot you can do to combat it. I mean, if you wanted to, I guess you could send an iPad out to somebody, but I don't know that you want to do that in a focus group. Just a plain. It's one thing if it's a deposition and you're sending. I mean, we've done that, right? You have a deposition and you send the computer stuff to the person so that they can participate, and you tell them to send it back, and normally they send it back. I mean, focus groups can be a little bit more difficult. I think that's the problem. I don't know right now in an online setting you can compensate for that. You just have to understand who is on your screen, so to speak, and you get the background information. And the only way that you can compensate for it, and it's only a partial compensation, is if you're doing surveys, because you can get to the people that are in the areas because they just need a phone. But if you're already doing a survey, that means you're not doing it yourself. Right. So, okay. but it's better than nothing, right? I mean, it's better than nothing. You're not really saving money unless you're going to go to a hotel room, right? You don't have that, but short of that, it's pretty much the same cost. And it's a lot more aggravation, to be honest with you.
All right. Well, Saul, can't thank you enough for speaking with us and sharing your time and everything you've got to share. It's been fantastic, and
thank you.
And look forward to talking to you again at some point here soon.
All right, guys. And remember, here's the email. So if you have questions or you want something, just shoot me an email. Either I or someone from the office will be able to get back to you with whatever you need.